Okay, well, welcome everybody back to our next session of Views from the Field with a very special guest and dear friend, Alessandro Giannandrea. Welcome, Alessandro.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure and our pleasure, I'm sure. So I'd like to mention at the beginning that these sessions are community supported. And we do have a link in the description below to my MBSR mentorship website, which will land you on a page that enables a donation if you choose to give one. If you're finding any insights or value in these sessions, we do appreciate any donations that can help keep this going, keep me going, keep the project alive as we move forward. So I wanted to say that up top and again, move back to welcoming Alessandro. So I had the great pleasure of actually being with Alessandro last May for 10 days in Italy. And Alessandro is coming to us from Pianello, which is part of Abruzzo, near Pescara in Italy, or part of Pescara too. And it's an absolutely beautiful location. And I recommend anybody who sees this, if you're in the field, you have a chance to visit, look up Alessandro. He's the best host I've ever experienced in terms of travel. So there you go, Alessandro. Maybe you'll get inundated with a few hundred new friends.
I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. So I do want to introduce you, and I want to introduce you in a way where I cover the easy stuff first. So you are certified in MBSR, MBCT, and MSc, which is quite an array. Are there any other MBPs that you're seeking out?
Not yet.
Okay. And along with that, you are, I'd say the founders, you wrote one of the lead teachers, so I'm not sure where the distinction is, but it's a master's in mindfulness and neuroscience at Sapienza University in Rome.
Mm-hmm.
Do you consider yourself a lead teacher or having founded the program?
Oh, I didn't found the program, but I do teach there. And I do so many hours with students that I would say one of the lead teachers, but there are so many other.
Okay. Right. And you're also an Aikido teacher. You've developed your own program that integrates mindfulness meditation and Aikido practices aimed at enhancing interpersonal mindfulness through Aikido's art of harmony. And I had the good pleasure of taking one of your workshops when I was a director of the center at UCSD, our Center for Mindfulness. And there's a great photo of you and I kind of fooling around doing some Aikido. If anyone wants to see it, it's also on my website. And we're kind of clowning around. But that was a very fun workshop, and I appreciate your teaching in Aikido. I learned that it's not a martial art. Is that correct, or did I kind of shift my view in some way that needs correcting?
Well, that's already an interesting question. I wouldn't call it a martial art. It's more like the art of harmony, as you mentioned. So it's not martial in the sense of fighting each other.
Okay, thank you. So this is the interesting part that I did not want to start with, which is your professional background as a psychotherapist trained in psychoanalytic psychopathy. and existential anthropology. So I didn't want to start with it because I actually want to pause here and find out what that is.
Sure. Well, I guess many of us are familiar with the psychoanalysis and the development that psychoanalysis went through after it was founded more than 100 years ago. So my studies started with psychoanalysis, and then I tried to integrate more models into the way I work. And one of these comes from anthropology and existentialism. So I know it's super, that could be a very long answer to your question, so I'm not going into the details of that. But it's basically trying to see how what we can call symptoms aren't in fact something to remove from the life of the patient. Maybe they can make sense. Maybe they can give meaning. And maybe they already make sense in a larger scheme. So looking at anthropology, what can I say? We can see the wider picture.
Can you give me an example of what that might look like?
Something that is happening over and over lately, I guess since COVID, that so many clients or patients are coming with panic attacks.
Mm-hmm.
And they all show up asking me to remove the symptoms. They don't want to panic anymore, and that makes sense, of course. But then as we move along and we keep investigating the meaning of what's coming up for them, quite often they find that they don't have panic attacks, they have wisdom attacks. So there are moments in which they can really look into their lives and maybe make changes and go in a different direction. And if they took medicines instead of going to therapy, maybe they would have no anxiety anymore, but they would lose an opportunity. So working with symptoms and asking what meaning can be set for you has helped so many people in so many different directions. And eventually also the panic goes away. So even the starting question it's fulfilled, but after a long journey, which led people in places that they wouldn't have explored without those symptoms. Does that make sense to you?
The part that made the most sense to me is the shift from looking at a lost opportunity by declaring it a panic attack and trying to, cure it with drugs or something, and reframing it as a wisdom attack, and then looking at what's underneath that.
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating, Alessandro.
Yeah. I just got back at work after taking a few weeks off for vacation. And I'm finding so much gratitude for my patients, like seeing them again for everything that they are teaching me. And that thing about the wisdom attacks actually came from someone. It wasn't my idea or my rephrasing. And that keeps happening over and over, just asking questions and listening I'm just a student of yours, so I'm trying to not know as you do, as well as you don't know things. So not knowing with them, it's such a powerful tool, and it's so different from knowing what's right for them or ways of healing or what's healing anyway.
Well, blessed to have that person who you spoke with who brought that out. Yeah, wonderful. So you're also the director, if I can drop back into your introduction of the Abruzzo Center for Mindfulness.
Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure about how long ago, but I would guess maybe 10 years ago, we found that there was no place to meditate in town. And we wanted just to make space for people to gather and meditate. And then we basically started that. Then we added activities such as yoga or Aikido. And in the meantime, the first MBSR group started. So nowadays we kept doing those activities. Then of course we had to stop the more physical ones, such as Aikido or yoga during the lockdown, which in Italy was really, really long. And today we are doing weekly meditations and programs such the MBSR, MSc. But we moved most activities online. And we founded the Italia Mindfulness after Abruzzo Mindfulness, which is like a national, I don't know how to define that, a group of teachers who are offering every day of the week in several times of the week a meditation group for free for everyone. And since the last 3 years, we had so many, like really a few thousand people participating in this group, and some of them have been meditating daily since when we started Italia Mindfulness. So it's a huge project that started after COVID, because we wanted to offer something that could be done online, and then we never quit. We just kept going, and that's the plan.
So Alessandro, how did you move into the field of psychotherapy, field of mindfulness? I'm not sure which came first for you. How did this all develop for you in your life?
Before wanting to become a psychotherapist, when I was a kid, I wanted to be, well, first a scuba diver and then a graphic designer. So I wasn't into, at least I didn't think I could be a psychologist, but I was doing martial arts, and I was interested in Zen meditation because it's part of the Japanese culture. I guess I was 13 or 14, and I was reading I think in English it's called the 4 Pillars of Mindfulness, or the 4 Foundations of Mindfulness, the Mahasatipatthana Sutta. Just going through the pages, sitting like on the beach, and something, that book is repeating itself over and over, just adding tiny bits of information. And I felt like, oh, there's something in that. And that's also very funny, because at the time, the image we had of Buddha in Italy wasn't the Sakyamuni Buddha, like the historical one, but it was the Chinese guy, that big belly, laughing Buddha. So my idea of Buddhism came from that image. I wasn't really able to compute, like, is that guy saying those things? But something clicked, and I kept studying Buddhism through high school. And then at a certain point after studying, I said, okay, let's do some meditation. And I was the only one who was interested in that, at least in my town, as far as I knew, of course. So I was sitting there and just counting my breaths. I didn't know how to meditate, so I was counting. And when I reached 20, I just stopped, and there was that empty space with nothing in it. Mm-hmm. After a few, seconds, I got scared. It all went away. But then I kept chasing that moment since then. And that's how it started, I would say. But, you know me, I did lots of crazy things in order to chase that moment, such as skydiving, all those crazy things, just to go back there, until I found at the University of Psychology a proper way to study it. And then it started. Like, it properly started.
Yeah. I'm curious, how many times through meditation have you experienced that moment where the veil lifts?
If I can borrow your words, I would say, I don't know. I think it's countless, like uncountable, because when I started doing proper Vipassana meditation, so after 20 years of fooling around with meditation, then it was suddenly available. So not like as a stable state, but I found a way to get back there and try to explore that, which then arose some, like lots of philosophical questions about what's that? How can I be aware of awareness without contents, what's that state?
What I'm wondering is, what are you learning from the students in the master's program?
Of course, there are so many and so many stories. We've been doing the master for maybe 9 years or something. And what strikes me every time we start a new year, and so next February would be the next one, that so many are coming from a different background, and they are all carrying a different definition of what is mindfulness and what is meditation or what is awareness. And exploring that is super interesting per se, because there are so many facets, and somehow they're all true. And then follow me on that, and somehow they're all false, because we cannot define. So through discussing those topics with them, if there is something certain that to me it's that thing about meditation that I'm trying to teach them with words and pictures and whatever, it's ultimately unteachable. There are no words to describe that. So I've been doing that impossible job for such a long time. And they taught me that, because if you keep questioning things, which happens in dialogues so often, you find out that there are no answers in the field of meditation, in the field of, let's say, of awareness. So there are some basic answers, like what is an MBSR, but that what is this thing that we call awareness or mindfulness? So I found through them my own ignorance on the topic.
We don't know, do we? What do you think we're looking for?
Well, when I started teaching, which was right after coming back from San Diego, back to Rome, and after doing my certification in MBSR, I was more certain about many things. So what is stress? What is stress reduction? What are we aiming to? Mm-hmm. And then I became less and less certain across the years. So my idea at the moment is that mindfulness not only is, but should be pointless, should be useless. In a philosophical sense, in a philosophical meaning, I don't mean on a surface level. Of course, we're going somewhere, at least towards stress reduction. Whatever that thing that we are aiming to is, it's not moving. So it's not something that we can reach or move towards, or actually it's not something that we can forget. So that's why it's very hard to define. It's like an eternal and infinite point in space and time. And how do you define that? How do you talk about that? I know I'm failing at my task even right now, right?
Miserably. No, not at all. I relate to a lot of it being about getting out of our own way. As soon as we think there's a point to it, or we're striving to get somewhere, we start getting in the way. So it leads me to the philosophical question of what is the use of that uselessness? What is at that place of getting out of our own way into that state where the veil lifts, and that experience to just have that experience shifts something in our consciousness, it seems to me, about our stories and constructs and things like that. Is that what you might think might be part of the usefulness of it?
Well, if we take a very radical approach, we're gonna reach a different answer. But I'm not going through the radical way right now. So I would say, once you start investigating what is that I'm trying to get rid of, or what is that thought? When I say what is that, I don't mean why is it that, or what's the reason, what's the use, but what's the stuff of that experience? Is it solid? Can I touch my thoughts? Can I touch my sensations? Can I touch my feelings? What's the matter of it? If you do that long enough, then it becomes not so different from awareness. So even a thought doesn't have a proper substance. And having that experience is really liberating, because you don't have to do so much about your thoughts or your feelings or your sensations. There is some sort of freedom in realizing that. And so I would say there is also some stress reduction because life looks a bit easier.
Well, that's beautifully put. And I think, that's what we're in training for, moment by moment.
Mm-hmm.
That ease towards that liberation and letting go and not being stuck and creating the constructs. Your work in mind wandering is where my mind is wandering too. Is that still a passion of yours? Are you still looking into that?
I'm still a mind wanderer, for sure. Yeah, of course, we published a few things about that topic. I'm interested in it in a different way from the one I was interested in when I was doing my PhD, of course. So at the time I was studying how does this affect the mood or your cognitive performances? What are the benefits of having a mind that doesn't wander so much? So that was more like a cognitive oriented study. Once I had that topic in my mind, the mind wandering, basically I started following that thing I was describing a few moments ago. Instead of what are the effects of mind wandering, the question was, what is mind wandering? What is this thing? What's going on here? And that's a very different question. It's so hard to do a proper scientific study about that. And, that's the hard problem of psychology. So I'm not even trying, at least through writing a paper about it. But it's one of my main interests at the moment, the nature of experience, including mind wandering, of course.
So I'm also curious if you're experiencing a sense that in the field, which I'm hearing from a number of different directions, that we might have reached kind of a bell curve in terms of participation in programs and courses, and whether that's due to people being too zoomed out because of being on Zoom all the time during the pandemic, or other reasons? Do you have any sense from your perspective in Italy that classes are filling as much, or programs are being run successfully, or do you sense that there might be a slight decline, as I'm hearing from other places?
We have been so surprised in finding out that right before summer, everyone wanted to do things in person. So they kept asking us, can you organize a retreat? Like, can we gather together and be somewhere? And then we tried to offer those kind of things. And that wasn't so, like, people didn't really want to turn into an action their wish. So in that sense, perhaps I think that something is happening. And that there's that paradox. Like we feel every class we offer on Zoom, but at the same time, people are asking for a meeting, like to meet in person, and then it works or it doesn't work, because then we also got used to the benefits of online classes. I don't know about participation in general to MBSRs, even listening to my colleagues in Italy. I know things are going decently, but the offer is so much broader now. There are so many teachers and groups. And so I would say the overall number of people doing meditation, it's improving, it's increasing. Maybe one thing to take into account is that there are thousands of teachers. And that's a good thing. Did I answer?
Yeah, it's true. There may be a saturation in terms of teachers, and there's also, a sense I have of, what is the quality of the teacher trainings that are out there in some cases. I know that's an issue in some countries where there's not as much integrity behind some of the trainings as others. Do you see any of that in Italy?
Yeah, I'm a bit concerned about that, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think there is a need for clarity about what is a certification program and how many years it takes, and how many efforts it takes to become certified. And it would be very beneficial if, when advertising for a mindfulness group, you would know, like, straight out from the advertisement, what's the training of teacher. So we have every kind of, like, mindfulness experts, mindfulness teachers, mindfulness, I don't know, whatever. And then actually something that also I find a bit concerning, but also interesting at the same time, that so much of the modern mindfulness is taught without a teacher. So if you see in your iPhone, probably there is already the mindfulness app, the mindfulness, and your watch, or it's everywhere, but without any feedback. So it seems like the world is trying to overlap mindfulness with breath exercises, and that's it. And that's a bit of there is so much more to it.
It's a day of voting in Italy. We don't get political, but at the same time, it's hard not to have these kinds of conversations and not look at the world that we're finding ourselves in, with all of the othering, with all of the lack of dialogue in a constructive way, people sitting down and really working through issues. So I'm wondering what your big picture view on all of this is, and particularly how our field is addressing it, and how we're working with it in our classrooms, and as I said, outside of that, in the bigger scope of the field.
But so if, of course, on one side, I want to get into the local politics because for reasons, say, but on the other hand, I think mindfulness is and should be political in a sense. So cultivating awareness, it's a political statement somewhat. Being in touch with your environment, your fellow humans, and with reality, whatever we define reality. He is political inherently and has a political effect. Also some immediate political effects. So you find that maybe you don't need so many things, maybe you are a bit more at peace with your neighbors, and so there is a role of mindfulness in society. And well, in the last decades, everyone started talking about ethics in mindfulness and compassion and all those topics. And that's very promising. I think we should do that some more. I know as psychologists, we are super reluctant to mention those things with classes. So usually what we do is suggest experiments. How does it feel to be more compassionate? And then next week, please tell me, how was it for you? So I think everyone here does the same, of course. Maybe mindfulness cannot suggest any answers, but there's lots of questions that are super beneficial to explore.
What would you suggest to somebody who was just starting out, curious about either taking a program, but I'm actually thinking more specifically about teaching? Do you have any guidance or in general to give somebody curious about entering into teaching who might be watching this as a way of inspiration?
Something that I do every time someone calls me and is curious about starting his or her journey in teaching mindfulness, I tend to be extremely clear about, are you aware that this entails meditating every day, probably for the rest of your life? Are you willing to do that? Are you open to do that, to make space for meditation? So we think very often there is that thought that teaching mindfulness is made of learning about teaching mindfulness, which of course it's a part of it, but I wouldn't say that's the main part. So meditation takes the biggest part of the cake, and that must be taken into account when starting a career as a mindfulness teacher, and that's a big commitment. And then there's a side effect of that, because if you actually then start meditating every day, that will affect your life, that will change your life. And so the warning number 2 that I would say is, are you aware that this is going to change your life? It's not something you can add to your skill set and leave it there. It's a transformational journey.
Absolutely. It's not about teaching an 8-week program necessarily. It does become a life-changing experience. Okay, well, Alessandro, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to have a chance to talk with you in this public way.
Thank you, Allan.
And if you've been watching any of our videos, including this one, and you'd like to hit the subscribe button to be notified of our future videos, we would appreciate that. And look forward to seeing you in our next one. So thank you again, Alessandro. Arrivederci. And we'll look forward to the next time you and I meet.
Ciao, Allan.
Ciao, ciao.
Click down below to join our mindfulness teacher community network on Facebook, where you are invited to post and share. Also, subscribe to Sing to the Mountain Studio. Ring the bell so you don't miss out on future recordings.